Welcome, everyone. This is the first in the series of the Practitioner Lens, which is a sort of mini masterclass held by people in the Mirror network for the network. And like I said, it's going to be shared with the public afterwards. The idea for this series actually came up because the Mirror approach to team and organizational alignment can add value in so many ways in so many situations. Let me just let these extra people in. So from onboarding to change, and from better remote learning to sharper innovation, and from adopting agile ways of working to teams in post-M&A situations, alignment is all about creating better shared mental models, and it's about reducing conflict. So as we know, this is about reducing conflict both cognitively in terms of what people understand about their shared challenges, and it's behavioral. It's all about how we will collaborate to deliver. So as a result of all of this kind of diversity of purpose, if you like, from Mirror, we've got a network of over 100 people who are experts in so many different areas. So we've got learning and development, agility, HR, OD, communications, team coaching, project management, leadership. And the question sitting right there in the middle was, how can we actually all learn from each other to build our capability here? So here we are. And I think this particular topic is a great one to start off with in the series. Clean language is something that we can all use in the practice of Mirror in the discovery process. Needless to say, the Mirror question sets have all been checked for clean, and we link to it in our training as well. So I'm very pleased to introduce Sharon Small as the first teacher in our Practitioner Lens series. Let me introduce you to her. Sharon is actually a celebrity, I might say, in the world of clean language. She's an independent researcher and internationally recognized clean language trainer and assessor. With over 13 years of experience working in the nuclear industry and a degree in archetypal psychology, which I can hardly even say, Sharon brings a host of skills and experiences. She's the author of The End of Therapy, co-editor of Who is Using Clean Language Anyway, and a leading authority on clean language methodologies and their use in the workplace. So Karen's going to run this 1 hour with you as a kind of mini masterclass, along with a little interactivity and some Q&A. The breakout sessions won't be recorded. We'll come back for the Q&A afterwards, though, that will be. And I'll just say that while on the surface, the practice of clean language sounds very simple, doesn't it? It's just about questions. But there's a lot more to it, as far as I gather. And to explain more about it, I will pass over to Sharon. So
thank you for your lovely introduction. So what I'm going to do today is, as Lindsay was saying, the Mirror process touches on so many aspects of shared mental models, team development, and all of us have such a different history and background. I was really challenged to figure out, how do I introduce clean, although a very simple concept, it's experiential, in a way that will make a bigger difference to all of you. So what I decided to do is to bring this in at a little bit of a meta level, so we can look at kind of the primary reasons we might want to use clean. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little screen sharing here. So let's see. And I'm not used to doing this full screen, so I'm going to give this a try and see what happens. I am going to ask that you guys participate in this presentation in the chat. And although I may not be able to get to all of your answers or responses, I just like it to be a little bit more interactive rather than me just talking at you about something. So just an overview of what we're going to try and cover in the next like 30 minutes or so, plus an activity and a Q&A. We're going to look at what is clean, what is contamination, like kind of metaphorically the opposite of clean, and leading as metaphors. 4 common things that we do every day. We all do it. We do it over the dinner table. We do it in the training room, and we do it in meetings all the time. And those places are okay. And it's more important to be aware of how we're leading when we're working directly with our clients. Simple ways that we can avoid this unintended influence, and this is using the clean questions and then a practice activity and Q&A. So is there anything that you would like to know before we begin? And I do have the chat window up so I can see what you guys might like to know. And if I can't address it in this 30 minutes, I'm happy to attend to those questions later. So is there anything you'd like to know before we begin? Okay, then let's go. So clean is a metaphor, and it's a metaphor for keeping as much of our stuff out of our clients' stuff as possible. It's also a linguistic model versus a psychological model. So we pay exquisite attention to the words that are being used. So when Lindsay talks about our mirror questions being looked at through a clean lens, what she means is that somebody with a lot of experience in clean language, including herself, has looked at these questions for their level of influence or their priming or other ways that linguistically they might prompt the person that we're working with to answer in particular ways. So this is why we call it clean language. It's not about a bar of soap. It's not about not cussing. It's simply a metaphor about keeping our stuff out, which brings us to this idea, what is contamination? And you're welcome to put your answers in the chat when I ask a question. I really am interested in your input. You know, it's like, how would you describe contamination? What might you say it is? And working in the nuclear industry, I got a really succinct, lovely, sweet little description of what contamination is. And contamination is when something, anything, is in a place. Yeah, an agenda, great. Putting bias, super. Yes, you're on the right track. And contamination is really, in a really simple way, it's when one thing is someplace that it's not meant to be. And that can be anything. So this is the kind of contamination we're most familiar with. And that's like garbage, or not even really garbage. They're plastic bags, they're plastic bottles, and they're simply someplace that they're not naturally meant to be. And that is what happens with our words. Our words can be put someplace in the client's information where they're not meant to be because they're not what the client said to us. We've added, right? Leading the witness with suggestions, exactly. And so that brings us to leading. So what is leading, right? So leading is when we take someone where we want them to go. Now, when we're thinking about the sales process, because in mirror, we're touching our clients in all sorts of ways. We're working towards rapport. We might be involved in the sales process. We're helping provide the reports. In some cases, we'll be doing interviews, we'll be working with groups. So there's all sorts of areas that we might be working with our clients, and it's really important to know that we're taking them where they need to go versus where we want them to go. And it's not villainy. So the thing is that most people, almost everybody I've ever worked with is not intentionally leading. They're not intentionally putting their material in. They're not intentionally trying to take the client someplace they want them to go. This is just about, we're only as good as the training and the experiences that we've had. And many people begin to have a very clean response simply because their experience of putting their own material in where it didn't belong and not having a good result with their client. So how fast this happens, this contamination or this influencing or leading, is really interesting. So we're just going to do a little thought experiment. So I'd like you to just think of an elephant and go ahead and type your elephant into the chat. You can type size, shape, perhaps where the elephant is. Just think of your elephant. And the reason I'd like it in the chat is because your elephant will be very different from other people's elephants, right? Baby elephant, gray African, Indian. So these are just the basic structures of an elephant. And if you guys were to have a conversation about the really idiosyncratic aspects of your elephant, you would find that although elephant is unknown to all of us, how we imagine an elephant will be different cuddly and purple, a solid, Dumbo. Yeah, so you're starting to get that your elephant may not be the exact same elephant as somebody else. Okay, so then I'd like you to think of a cup of coffee or tea. There may be tea drinkers in here and coffee drinkers. And go ahead and just put in a description of your cup. Size, shape, color, anything that is unique to your cup. It can be a favorite cup that you actually use. It can be a cup in your imagination, right? An NCFC mug, Union Jack, clean and white, tall glass, great. White large cup, porcelain. Oh, somebody even, I love that somebody's doodling. That is so cool. Okay, I got to learn how to do that. That's really, really lovely. Great. Okay, so the next thing I'd like you to do is think of an elephant with a cup of coffee. And just notice what happens, right? So I'm imagining for some of you, and just, go ahead and give a thumbs up or a yes or an N if anything happens when I asked you to think of an elephant with a cup of coffee. Yes. Yeah, a cup with big ears. Yeah, a trunk curled around the mug. Super. So this is called conceptual blending, and this is what we do as human beings. I like to say very simply, this is our creative process in action. We have this amazing ability as people to take two divergent ideas and blend them together in a matter of milliseconds. So this is why being clean and really attending to the language we use is so important, because we can unintentionally influence our clients in ways that we're not meaning to so quickly. It's impossible to take back. Once it's done, and you just have to think, okay, what needs to happen from here? And what we want is we want our clients to be discussing and finding out what needs to happen for them in order for them to get along better, to have greater shared purpose, to have more equality in their teams. And the mirror process has been designed to get at the primary information. And it's our job as mirror facilitators and those helping with the process to keep as much of that information that these clients have shared in that space of the client, and to keep as much of us out so that they can really design and get to know each other better and do better together as a group. So some of the terms I'm going to use today just for ease are facilitator, and this is the person asking the questions, client for the person answering the questions, and for the exercise I'm going to use a term called observer, and that's simply a listener. And sometimes this is the most challenging position because we ask you to observe without commentary during the activity. So I'll really be attending to facilitator and client over the next slides. So let's look at 4 common ways that we lead. And as I said, these aren't villainy, these are just the way our language works. We introduce content, we ask questions based on our assumptions, our model of the world. So when Lindsay's talking about shared mental models, often before we have a shared mental model, we're trying to introduce our mental model, right? And when we're learning about our clients, their mental model is exquisitely important. We often prompt cause and effect relationships. And I like this one, we often act on premature evaluation. So these are 4 common ways that we lead or get involved in conversations. Hang on here, okay. So great, so let's look at introducing content. So introducing content is any time that we introduce statements or questions that contain concepts, metaphors that have not been previously introduced by the other person. And what most often happens is the person will try on what we've said, and they'll either adopt it, even if it's not quite right, or they have to refute it. And here's an example of, an example of this is paraphrasing, right? So when we're paraphrasing, we actually change the meaning of what was said using our view of the world. And I know that this is taught in active listening, and in some circumstances, this is just the right thing to use. When we're interviewing and when we're trying to get really clear, authentic information from our clients, it may not be the appropriate time for paraphrasing. So what we do in Clean is we parrot phrase, and we'll go through that later in the activity. And I'm just struggling a little bit with the full screen and the chat and the windows. So if I hesitate between slides, it's me trying to figure out what buttons I'm actually meant to be pushing. So here's an example of introduced content, metaphor, and priming. So the introduced content is the word impact. In this actual interview, impact was not used by the client. It was used by the facilitator. The metaphor, impact is a metaphor, and we will see that in a moment. And the priming effect is the fact that it was introduced multiple times in a very short period of time. So you can see that how has this memory affected your life? What impact has it had on your life? The client is wondering exactly what part of their conversation the facilitator is asking about. And there the facilitator uses impacted and impact twice in a row. And here, the client adopts it. You can see that they have now given in to that facilitator's metaphor. And it's much easier as clients to give in than it is to refute. And oftentimes when clients refute what we give them, they're seen as being difficult or resistant to a new idea, when sometimes the new idea simply doesn't fit their mental model, their frame of the world. So here's one introduced metaphor. How does the coach handle a rupture in a coaching relationship? I was going to put an image of rupture in, but if you Google it, you'll see why I didn't. It's really not very pretty. Paraphrasing and metaphor, this is something, like I said, over the dinner table. This might be completely appropriate. But it's better to ask a few clean questions or just a few clarifying questions to find out before we paraphrase something like throwing in the towel and calling it quits. Is very different than what this client above said. And metaphor essentially is the essence of one thing described in the terms of another. So there are many words that we use that we could call embedded metaphors or dead metaphors. They're words that we don't even see as metaphorical, and impact, coming back to that word, is one of them. Impact, we know what an impact is by its effect in the physical world, right? The impact of something on something else. So to say the effect of something is less metaphorical, hence a little less leading. And of course, I'm going to do this caveat because context is king, and it all depends on the context that you have come into, that you've asked your clients to come into, and the context of our working relationship and the company that we're working with as Mirror facilitators. So another thing that we do is we do structural presuppositions. So that's a big fancy word for basically saying that we presuppose that something is true, and then we make statements or ask questions based on this presupposition of truth. And again, here the client is expected to reject it if it doesn't quite fit. And adopting something, going along with something, is almost always easier than rejecting it. So often clients, again, will go along with our assumptions that we speak out in question or in statements, rather than creating an argumentative, what they might assume is an argumentative or a contentious environment. So this is another reason to be very careful about the actual words that we use when we're working with clients. So, so here's a structural presupposition and also another metaphor, right? Hard. So this person has had a heart attack. They're going back to work. And the person is there to, it's an HR person, and they're there to find out the effect that this heart attack had on this client in going back to work. So you can see the first thing they do is, how hard was it to go back to work? The first thing they presume is that it was hard for this person. And then they introduced, did it make you feel frightened, worried? And the client says, well, at first, but then I'd say, no, you just got to plod on, right? And then the facilitator again introduces hard and harder. And here the client again adopts it. And these are real interviews taken for this, not taken for this purpose, but found for our examples. And so this is, again, it's like the presupposition comes in the first question. And it's not that we can never make a presupposition. It's just best to know when we are and to know when we aren't. So another one is a logical presupposition. And again, that's just a fancy way of saying we presuppose a relationship between two things. So recently what's been happening in my neighborhood is we had an event where we had some people come out and do a demonstration. And during that time, we also had some people get up on the roof and with semi-automatics to protect their property. And in this conversation that we're having within our community, one of the people said, well, the demonstration was friendly because we were up on the roof with our guns. And I pointed out that correlation is not necessarily causation. So that's what I mean by a faulty cause and effect. So you can imagine that the conversations we're having here are you know, potentially heated, and it takes a lot to come in and to keep them, you know, leaner. So, so this is, you know, and again, the client is likely to adopt our presupposed relationship. Have you ever had that kind of conversation where you go away later and you go, what just happened? Or that wasn't quite exactly it. So these are just things that we need to attend to, you know, especially as we're working with our clients. And in the mirror process, you know, this has been created with the questions in mind and staying with those clients' answers to those questions that Lindsay has created and had reviewed for this mirror process is really important. And the more we can keep ourselves out of the equation, the more likely we can keep what's most important to those clients in. So here's another presupposition. So you can see, and these aren't big ones. These aren't like, you know, life and death, you know, cause and effect relationships. It's just notice them. How important is the coach-client relationship to the outcome? How does working with others who have less experience than you affect your work? And did he leave soon after the new manager was assigned? Probably the one that has the most like kind of stickiness to it is that last one. So did he leave soon after the new manager was assigned? There's a little bit of a lean in there. So this isn't about, you know, my talk isn't about never doing this. It's just the awareness of when we are and when we're not, and how do we know when this might be happening. So, and the last one is the premature evaluation. And this is basically making an evaluation prior to having all the information, and then saying something that may undermine the client's either own confidence in what they've said, may have them question their experience or their description of their experience, and it may make them more susceptible to being led. So here's an example of a really simple one. It's an interview actually with a student advisor, and he's just saying, you know, I have about 60 students that I advise, and the interviewer is like, you know, really, how can you have a relationship with so many? So rather than asking how this person goes about working with 60 students, there's this conclusion that he has a relationship with so many, and now this advisor is left to either defend how he has a relationship, or to, you know, perhaps even feel bad that he doesn't have a relationship. So it kind of creates a bit of a quandary. So how do we avoid these? And how do we avoid these, especially in the mirror process, as we're learning about our clients, as we're listening to our clients, as we're going through the results of the mirror testing, as we're looking at either the interviews that they do themselves, or we're looking at the interviews that we've done with them if you're doing the fuller process. How do we begin to avoid these? And the first is to learn your craft. And for us as mirror consultants or facilitators, that means really, really understanding the mirror process inside and out, having it down, understanding the coding if we need to, knowing the questions that are being asked, knowing about our company, our people. So know your craft. And part of our craft as facilitators and consultants is about knowing our purpose, right? Why are we there? What is our purpose? And staying on purpose helps you avoid what's happening with these road signs, which it's very easy to take bright and shiny things that happen and to get off track. So knowing your purpose, staying on purpose. In a way, you might say metaphorically, picking the path, right? So part of our job is to follow that mirror path and to stay on purpose of the shared mental models and really getting to know how to get along better. Listening accurately. So remember I was talking about paraphrasing. So what we do in Clean is we parrot phrase. And in order to parrot phrase, i.e. say exactly the words that the client used, we need to listen accurately. We cannot be listening and interpreting at the same time. And it may seem like a strange thing to do to parrot back client's words, but actually, if you can do that and ask a very simple question, people feel very heard. The first tendency when you don't have this experience is to have the sense that people might think you're mimicking them. And that's part of why active listening was created, is to prevent that. And sometimes that can happen if you're in an intense relationship, in a heated discussion. Sometimes active listening may be the better tool. But for us, when we're asking and learning about our clients, listening accurately is so important. And then asking clean questions. So now we're finally getting to, we know the function of clean, right? Which is to keep our stuff out. But how do we do that? And how do we do that linguistically? And the clean questions are a very simple set of questions. We have what we call classically clean questions, and then we also have contextually clean. For this little time that we have together, I'm only going to be introducing the classically clean questions, and you would be amazed at what you can do with these questions. I can run a 90-minute session with a client and never diverge from these questions. That's quite a feat. And it's not something that I strive to do all the time. Contextually clean questions would be the next iteration of this particular training. And, but knowing the classically clean questions is important first. So you can see they're super simple. What kind of, those little dots denote the client's words. So what kind of bicycle is that or is that bicycle? Or what kind of argument is that argument? Or is there anything else about that way of working? Where is, whereabouts? Does something have a shape or size? What happens next? When this, what happens next? Or when this, then what happens? And what happens just before? And you can put a what happened and what happened just before. Where could X come from? That's like what is designed to help elicit metaphor, if that's what you'd like to be doing. And when X, what happens to Y? So this is a really great question for checking cause and effect. So when X, what happens to Y? So these are really super simple little questions you can see. So great. They're clean because they make maximum use of our client's terminology. They conform to the logic and presuppositions that our clients bring to us. And they only introduce the universal metaphors of form, space, and time. Now, right now we're going to be doing a lot online. So the gesturing, being congruent with the client nonverbals, isn't as important as it will be when you're doing face-to-face facilitation. And what that simply means is that in some processes, they teach mirroring as pointing to and around our own body. So if somebody says, it's in my head, we say, and it's in your head. But in clean language, we do that differently. We always look and point and gesture to around the other person's. So if they say it's in their head, I would say, and it's in your head. because it's not in my head, is it? It's in their head. And this seems like a little bit of a fine point, but when you're in front of people and you begin to do this, it makes such a difference to gaining rapport and helping them feel comfortable. So a wordy slide here, what it helps increase, questions that can be answered easily, rapport and trust, data authenticity and accuracy, sequence and timelines, and better recall. It helps decrease and reduce our presuppositions, our assumptions, our judgments, our tendency to see what's not there rather than what is. That's part of that premature evaluation. This leading or unclean questions, dual or multi-content questions. The other thing we saw in the earlier examples was that some of these were actually 2 questions posed at one time. So the conflation of terms, you know, this helps to keep the distinction. And then of what the client said, confirmation bias and addition of content. And if you rewatch this, you'll notice that every example that I used had added content. So in every example, the facilitator added something to the client's content. Clean is not the same as open and closed. Okay, you can have clean and open, clean and closed, not clean and open, and not clean and closed. You can still lead and unintentionally influence your clients by using open questions that are loaded with content and metaphor and presupposition. So our intent to clean is simply to give our clients the greatest possible lateral to answer in their own frame of experience. And this is, you know, this is, Lindsay has worked, I've gone through this, you know, with this mirror process, gone through this. This is exquisitely done compared to other processes like this. I think Lindsay has just her thumb and the bead on how to help do this in a way where we also have a very scalable process, right? So we can use this with a small company, we can use this with a large organization, we can use this within teams. It's so flexible and functional, and one of the reasons is that it has been vetted to be clean. Clean is an open, neutral tool, and this is our intention when we're asking questions and listening. So just really briefly where it came from, there was an innovator called David Grove, and he passed away in 2008. And he used to say, clean language is simple because people are complex enough. And then David was found by James Volley and Penny Tompkins. They modeled what David was doing, and they created a teachable model that they have available in their book Metaphors in Mind. Great. So what time is it? Ooh, we're good. So we're getting to the exercise. So there are 2 rules of thumb. Remember Lindsay said it was simple? Really simple. 2 rules of thumb. Only use your client's words. Only use clean questions.
Simple.
I'm going to repeat that. Yeah. Lindsay?
Yep. Only use client's words and only use clean questions.
Okay. So sounds easy, right? Hey, I got this. Well, we're going to find out. So let's give it
That was quite fun.
Good.
Okay. Well, I think it's safe to say that was a bit of a speed session.
Yeah.
It was. It was a little bit of a speedy session. Super. So what did you notice doing that? And you're welcome again. You're welcome to put in the chat what you noticed. I guess one question would be, were you able to only use the client's words? And if not, or if you found yourself struggling with that, what was happening? What did you notice? So Jeremy did a great job. Super. Yeah, it was very unnatural, but worked. Yes. Yeah, it can feel unnatural when we're first learning. And what kind of struggles, Susie? And yeah, it does. It helps bring awareness to how we do lead people. Yeah. Oh, struggle not to use the other words. Yeah. Good. I'm glad you noticed that. A heavy topic. Okay. Yeah. So sometimes this can be And the thing that's nice about clean when a topic is heavy or very emotionally charged is knowing that we're not putting our content in, so we're not adding to, but we're not also not responsible for relieving the other person as well. We really become a beautiful witness, you know, in their experience. Okay, trying to resist the temptation, yeah, to jump in. Feeling a bit stilted, absolutely, yeah, that can happen when you're first learning. Yeah, yeah, super. Thank you so much. And wanting to probe was a temptation. Yeah, I call that the bright and shiny, right? Like, you know, like the I guess, like sometimes I use the metaphor like magpie, you know, it's like, woo, you know, it's like, ooh, that's a bright and shiny thing. And that happens in facilitation, it happens in interviewing. Really, it's a normal response. And I like to say we get very good at being clean on the outside and just know that you're still going to be a dirty, dirty person on the inside. Assumptions, judgments, all of that still happen in our brain. They do. We just get better at noticing when we want to interject, and we get more skillful at using these questions that may not feel natural. And essentially what these do is help you become a much better modeler. So you'll be much more capable of modeling what the other person wants, needs, and desires. So yeah, as an observer, easy to listen, but hard not to react. Great to notice. This is like gold in the meeting, right? How many times have we been in a meeting and it's like, you know, you can feel like your response rising and it gets to the edge of your bottom lip and you're just like, you just want to like get it out there, you know? And now you have a question, a few questions that you can ask instead. So, so great. So very interesting, testing the discipline of paraphrasing instead of paraphrasing. Yeah, yeah, great, great. Thank you. Super. So, so then I just want to know, because we're coming to the end, we're at 7:52. What is one thing that you'll be taking from this meeting, and how do you imagine you might, I know here's a double question, right? See how easy they happen? So let's do the first one first. What's one of the most valuable things that you're going to leave this meeting with? Lindsay, yes.
Well, I just wanted to say the bit about structural preposition was really, really useful, because it's just so natural to want to fit things into your own mental model, isn't it? I think, by the way, on this piece, we can just come off mute for people who want to chat. Yeah. There's enough of us to just sort of chime in. But for me, that noticing that structural presupposition and being aware that other people will have them, and better listening is giving them their own structure. That's what I'm taking away.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? And you can unmute and just, yeah.
I think too that it's important to practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see from Terry, raise awareness of how I may unintentionally lead the conversation. Yeah, great. And do you imagine this might be useful as mirror consultants, facilitators? Yeah, I see some heads nodding.
Yeah, I feel like I need a half-day workshop on it now, though. I need to learn more.
Great, yeah. And yeah, and do you guys have any questions about today, or about clean, or what you noticed, your experience?
I've been studying clean for a little while, and the more that I learn, the more I find myself using it in actually everyday conversations, trying to listen without putting myself into it to actually hear, because I can become very domineering very fast.
What kind of listening?
Complete listening.
Yeah.
Well, look, Pierre's holding up a couple of books. Clean language, metaphors in mind.
Yay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I was wondering about additional resources. Additional resources would be, I'm very interested in, I'm also thinking how powerful this could be in helping, you know, certainly in the States, we're having so much trouble with racial issues right now. I think, and the level of ignorance of, you know, white people about Black people's experience and the danger of the assumptions is just so high. This could be just a really powerful tool, I think, in helping with, you know, racial issues, I would think.
Yeah, yeah. Any highly emotional context, being a better listener and a better modeler is incredibly useful. And as we all know, sometimes people just want to tell their story. Hey, hang on, Pierre, give me 1 second. Daniel was interested in knowing how it works across cultures. So Daniel, there's in clean questions, there's an intended effect of the question. So it works across cultures because it's a linguistic model versus a psychological or social model. But sometimes the questions do need to be adopted or adapted in a specific language to create the purpose. So like what kind of is a kind of a pointier question, finding about the kind of something versus anything else is a broader question. The biggest thing is in English we have what's called a perfect present tense, and that's the hardest one, and that's in that question, what would you like to have happen? Yeah. I hope that's helpful. Pierre?
Yeah, so I give you some feedback. I don't know if it's worth it. So for multicultural, you have to just to say that most of the languages are all metaphorical in the whole world. So we're just touching off what we can say the roots of the language. And when you say translating clean language or clean question into languages, the main issue is just to make it clean, the clean part. Because I'm native French and German speaker, so it's quite obvious in English, but it's a little bit tricky in the other languages. And based on the point of what we want to need about reading more documentation, whatever, I guess the best thing is really to experiment, to try it out, because it reveals emotions, and you have a conversation, and you have just to train to lock you out from your own, what we say in coaching, you have to go in level 2 or level 3, not being judgmental. And what I think, so I do this since over 2 years now, and there's also an impact on how your communication, your level of communication is going. Because when you try out the clean language question, the clean questions, you become also more calm by asking questions. So it's a win-win situation. It's quite fantastic.
Thank you, Pierre, and thank you for speaking to the other languages. So I'm gonna turn this over to Lindsay, and then just before we end, we're gonna do a little fist bump rating on how the session went. So Lindsay.
Yes, well, I just want to say, you know, thanks very much. I love your presentation style. It's so kind of calm and personable and easy to follow, and I'm still getting the impression that it looks much easier than it sounds. I didn't take part in the breakout rooms. You know, some of you might have found that a little bit frustrating because it was too short, but hey, all in the spirit of trying. There's another network call, as you know, well, 2 network calls on the 24th of this month. Maybe we can take some of the discussion further because there'll be fewer of us in each call. And so I found it very useful, excellent reminder. One of those things that we can just all get better at listening all the time. So thanks for that. And yes, let's go for that little feedback session, true mirror mirror style. I'd like you to hold your hand up. 5 is, yeah, that was amazing. 1 is, I hated it. Please give.
Yeah, we've got 0. What? There was nothing. 5. Woohoo!
We got 10s here. Double marks. Fantastic.
Yay. Oh, good. Oh, good. And I will put some resources together. You have a lot of very resourceful, clean people. You've got Micah from Holland, Judy Reese, and Steve McCann. But I'll put together a list of some complementary resources that you can access belonging to various people around the globe. And I'll send that to Lindsay, and perhaps she'll find a way to disseminate that so you can start doing something
fantastic.
Free and breezy.
Put them in the Alignment Matters group, and thank you very much for joining, everybody. See you later.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks, Sharon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. That was wonderful.